This is the Everything EV podcast by EV Powered.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Everything EV podcast, the podcast dedicated to everything electric. I'm your host, Charlie Atkinson, and in these episodes we'll be discussing everything to do with electric travel. So whether it be cars, bikes, boats, or even planes, we'll have it covered. We'll also be speaking to people from within the industry to get their views on the EV space, as well as other features such as electric car reviews, electric motorsport coverage, and much, much more along the way. This podcast is available on all streaming platforms, so be sure to subscribe to wherever you get your podcast from to receive every single episode as soon as it's released, and please do go back and check out all our other episodes too. In this episode, I'm joined by James Eaton, the CEO and co-founder of EV battery firm Ionetic. Ionetic came to the market earlier this year with its cost-effective battery pack solution, and James is here to tell us all about the new technology as well as discussing the journey of the company so far. So James, good to be speaking with you today. Now, tell us about Ionetic. What was the initial inspiration behind the company and how did the journey of the company begin?
Yeah, so I was working as a researcher at Imperial College London in what's known as the battery group here, and was working on like various industry projects. So I was the sort of Imperial representative from the academia side, and then working with lots of different car companies, and essentially realized that even though the people I'm on these calls with have been in automotive for tens of years, I ended up being the expert in the room because I spent at that point sort of 2-3 years in battery pack. And it's obviously like a very changing market for automotive. And it was that point I sort of realized, I could clearly leverage this. So at that point, I decided to launch a consultancy. So that was what Ionetic started as. It was going to be a consultancy. So we just do like specific projects, like bespoke designs, or like, make battery packs better, basically. And that lasted for about 3 weeks, maybe a month, because then we started speaking to different car manufacturers, primarily small ones, and realized that they didn't need another consultancy. They didn't need another expensive option. They needed to be able to electrify, and they needed to be able to electrify affordably and with good engineering solutions. So we pivoted basically, and then we decided to attack that problem. So take a sort of blank slate approach at how do you come up with cost-effective but still optimized engineering solutions for battery pack, and that's how Ionetic came to be.
And where are we now on that timeline of the company? When did everything start, and what position are you in now?
So we launched as a consultancy on January 4th, and then by February that had changed. So that's where I think we're now sort of 8-ish months in. So it's basically spent the last 8 months doing, obviously a lot of planning, hired some people, and obviously a lot of technical development to support the platform, to support ARC. So that automatically optimizing battery pack design platform.
And did you have any interest in the automotive world before this, or were you mainly looking at it from the engineering and battery side of things? Do you have any interest in electric vehicles or cars in general?
Oh yeah, I am a big car nerd, 100%. I've always really wanted to work in cars in some way, whether it was in F1 or in sort of passenger cars, really. So it's been a passion of mine for a long time. I still remember watching Lewis Hamilton win the Drivers' Championship in 2008, overtaking Timo Glock on like the third to last corner. So I'm a big car guy. A lot of my friends take the mick out of me because I can like name every car on the street. So it's definitely a big passion of mine, and it's one of the driving like factors behind the company is that mission, essentially, to make sure that the small car brands can actually electrify, because currently they can't. Like currently there's no path for them because it's either too expensive, the minimum order quantity is too high, or the engineering solutions from like off the shelf, they're just not good enough for what they need. So that really is sort of a driving factor behind why the company is the way it is because I want to see these companies not only survive electrification, but like thrive through that journey as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because it seems as though things have shifted in the EV industry from where people were saying, oh, I'm not too sure on EVs, I'm not too sure if they are the future. And there were questions about range and charging and all things like that. But now it seems as though it's moved to a point where people go, oh, I would get an EV, but only if I could afford one. So the focus has now sort of shifted to, okay, how do we make these things affordable? And so, I mean, you mentioned the word mission earlier in your last answer. And so how would you summarize the mission statement of Ionetic and how that relates to the affordability of electric vehicles?
Yeah, I mean, our mission is really to enable niche vehicle manufacturers to electrify. We want to create great technology, and we want to become sort of a market leader really for design and manufacture of battery packs. Because there just fundamentally aren't that many companies that design and manufacture in volume, and that obviously needs to change. It can't stay a fragmented market where if you're a car company, you need to go to like 4 different companies to actually get a battery pack into production. So that really is what sort of drives us, is wanting to see all these exciting vehicles, and the vehicles that sort of underpin society as well. Like trucks are niche vehicles, and buses are niche vehicles, and delivery vans are niche vehicles, and all of those things that sort of support daily life, they're all niche vehicles, and they're all made by niche vehicle manufacturers, and some of them in Europe and the UK.
Yeah, you mentioned before we started recording that you are fully living that startup life at the moment, and you said earlier that you're 8 months in as well. So what have been some of the biggest challenges for you personally and for the company so far?
I mean, obviously there are technical challenges, so you've got to develop the technology, and that's not always straightforward, especially if you're trying to achieve crazy performance targets. We're aiming for 30% improved energy density over a lot of other solutions on the market, which is not straightforward to achieve. The volume utilization problems, all of that stuff we had to overcome. I think from a strategy perspective, with a company like Ionetic, where it's sort of manufacturing focused, the barrier to entry is obviously quite high, both in terms of people, in terms of capital. So in the past, we have found that there's sort of been a chicken and an egg problem, really, where the sort of larger end of the customer base will not want to fully commit until that you've demonstrated that you can do it, but you can't demonstrate you can do it until you've got a customer saying, let's do this, so that you can get the funding to do it. So it's like this chicken and egg problem, which I think we've overcome now, but that's always a problem, especially with something that has an MVP that is so expensive. It's not like a software business where you can develop in sort of very low increments, and you can get out of pre-revenue very quickly with like a very low customer base. But we might only have sort of 10 customers, right? So there's only so much you can do in that regard. So that's been one of the biggest challenges, I'd say, is overcoming the chicken and egg problem. And I think we've worked it out now. But yeah.
Okay, so when we talk about the EV industry and how far it's come over the last few years, it seems as though we're seeing lots of new battery tech companies and lots of innovation within the space. And so when you consider the competition, if that's the right word for it, what is it that sets Ionetic apart, and what is it that makes you guys stand out from the crowd?
Well, I think our main USP is our sort of balance between customization and cost reduction. So we can basically get a battery pack into production for up to 90% of the cost, 90% less, than many other people on the market. And when you're currently looking at the market and you're seeing that developing a battery pack costs more than the vehicle development budget in total, so just the battery pack costs more than the total vehicle development budget, that's really important. You really need to reduce the cost versus the current options. So that's probably our key selling point. And then you add on the manufacture, because we think that's essentially critical. Like, we don't think you can just do design of battery packs. It doesn't provide anyone with a cost-effective solution. So I think that really is where our USP lies, because the volume battery pack manufacturing doesn't really exist in the UK at the moment, and that needs to change, and we're obviously trying to change that. In terms of the sort of wider market, I personally find it tough to sort of see people as competition, because the demand is so high that no matter how many new things come about, there will be a place at the moment. Especially with like different USPs that people are bringing out, and obviously in the long term there'll be some consolidation in 10 years, 15 years. But I think at the moment it's just really interesting to see it. Every week, as you say, some new technologies coming along. It's just super interesting in this period of growth where there are just innovations everywhere. Whereas that's not really happened in automotive for, well, essentially 100 years, because combustion engines sort of, got to 90% of where they are today very quickly. Whereas, we're making real step changes in battery packs, on a weekly basis in some cases. So it's super interesting to see from that perspective. I have absolutely no concerns about competition. I think it's great.
Okay, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to answer this question, but I'm just going to go for it and ask it anyway. But without giving away any of your secrets, obviously you say your solution is a much more cost-effective solution to other products out there. So what is the process, and what are some of the key components of how you've been able to develop that product but no one else has been able to? So, I mean, without telling me your secrets, what are those secrets?
So I think, so there's three things. Two of them are like how we actually achieved that, and one of them is why we've ended up here. Why we ended up here is basically because we had the opportunity, because we were starting from zero, to really take a blank slate approach. Whereas everyone else, existing companies, maybe traditional consultancies that are pivoting into battery pack, have their existing business models and have sort of incremented to the point they're at now. We had the opportunity to look at how we would actually deliver a battery pack cheaper and also still a good engineering solution. So that's how we sort of came to that position. But the way we actually achieve that in reality is, one, using ARC. So that allows us to quickly design optimized battery pack solutions without having an engineer sit in front of CAD for 3 months. We've made a whole set of design decisions to do with materials and manufacturing processes and adhesives and spacing and all those things. All those design decisions are made. So that allows us to quickly automate design. So, we can make a module 1 meter long or 1.3 meters long or 80 centimeters long. All of those things we can just do, in an instant. Because we've made all these design decisions already, we're not redesigning everything for everyone, which means that's the first thing that brings the cost down. I mean, redesigning everything for everyone is not something you can do if you're trying to achieve cost reduction. The second thing we decided to do was do design and manufacture, because firstly, by doing both, it allows you to really reduce the margin on the upfront, on the consultancy, on the design part. But it also means you can optimize either side. So our manufacturing lines are spec'd for ARC, which means that we can make it quicker and faster. And because the design up front knows what manufacturing line it's going on, we can really optimize the design as well. So getting both parts of that together under one roof are of critical importance, really, to making sure we can do a more cost-effective solution.
Yeah, you mentioned that you're sort of set on those design decisions now, and that's what helps make it cost-effective. So is there any room for further development and further innovation, or are you sort of set on that one design and just focusing on that right now? So, Yeah, what are the sort of next steps for the company?
Yeah, so Arc in itself, in theory could be expanded. The concept behind it, there's not limited to, well, it's currently 2170 format, so there's no limit for that, right? We could expand it to 4680, or we could expand it into prismatic. But we're definitely looking at future technologies and what they would enable, especially in terms of cost and energy density. So in terms of our future technologies pipeline, we're always looking at new technologies. In terms of the existing solutions though, and where we're going, we basically are now getting customers hopefully into sort of A sample and prototyping and getting them on the road really using Arc.
And how long is that timeline? How long do you expect it to take from where you are now to, like you said, getting these battery packs into prototypes and into customers' cars effectively?
Yeah. So like a good ballpark would be probably 18 months from sort of requirements to you're like in production fully, and our customers are delivering to their customers, which is quite a rapid turnaround for all.
Yeah, that does seem quite quick. I was expecting a timeline of sort of 3 to 5 years for some reason.
Yeah, well, so that's what normal automotive timelines are. There are a few reasons we're not doing that. One is we're not redesigning everything, so we can just, we can skip the whole 12-month working out what bus bar material we use. So that saves us some time. But also because of the market we operate in, our customers tend to want to go quite a lot faster than that. So, we're talking to people who want, 2024 start of production, which basically means you need to hit an 18-month turnaround on battery pack development in order to actually achieve that.
Okay, great. And now, just to finish things up, I mean, I always end these podcasts by asking our guests for their thoughts on the future of the business, almost like that typical interview question of where do you see yourself in the next 10 years? But what is that long-term vision of Ionetic, and what does the future have in store for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, well, the long-term vision is to have 5 gigawatt hours per year of battery pack development, battery pack manufacturing capability deployed in the UK. Hopefully, we should have that in the next 5 years, all being well. The demand is clearly there. Demand is way higher than supply, and probably will be for a while. So that's the sort of high level target. But we also have other targets. Like we think by the time we've made all the packs over the next 5 years, we should have mitigated the production of 100,000 tons of CO2, which is really important. That's kind of also part of the reason, right? We need to demolish carbon emissions before 2030, and the only real way we're going to achieve that is by sort of electrifying everything. So that's part of the key goals. In terms of short term, we should have manufacturing capability next year to start doing A sample production and prototype production for automotive companies. And obviously we're growing in basically every metric you can track, hopefully. So that's the short term and long term.
That's all for this episode. Many thanks for listening, and if you liked it, then please do check out all our other episodes and be sure to subscribe to wherever you get your podcast from to make sure you get every single episode as soon as it's released. For daily news coverage, features and much more, you can also head over to evpowered.co.uk. Thanks once again for listening, and we'll see you on the very next episode of the Everything EV podcast.